Welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about something we haven't really talked about before. I think we've talked around data, but today we're going to talk about customer data management, or CDP, as a customer data platform. We're going to talk about things with modern data stacks. So, going to dive into data, I think, in a meaningful way. We're going to highlight, for those of you following at home, we're going to highlight a product or a software called RudderStack. So if you want to follow along at home, it's at www.rudderstack.com. And you can pull that up and kind of follow along at home as we look at what RudderStack is and how it addresses customer data management and the customer data platforms. We're going to do that all today with Mitra. He is the founder and CEO of RudderStack. He started RudderStack in 2019, recently raised a $56 million Series B round led by Insight Partners with support from previous investors, Kleiner, Perkins, and their initial $28 million investment. So obviously something here that folks are investing into. It's his third startup, which is also very cool. He sold his previous startup, which was a B2B ad tech platform called MarianaIQ, to 8x8, where he spent a year building customer data pipelines. Do we notice a theme here around customer data? While there, his challenges collecting and processing customer data at an enterprise scale inspired him to start RudderStack. He's now building RudderStack to address the pain points he became intimately familiar with at 8x8. Thank you so much for taking the time. We were just sharing as we were getting acquainted pre-recording. He's based out of New York, and he was visiting a friend and made the time to join us here on the podcast. So, Soumya, thank you very much for taking the time.
Really appreciate you having me on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to this. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you must have a passion around data management, customer data management, because you did it once and you were like, "Oh, that's not good enough. I'm going to do it again." Talk to me a little bit about your journey, kind of as a founder around customer data management. Why did that become your platform? Like, what's so important about customer data management that you felt you wanted to start a couple companies around it?
Yeah. So maybe I'll quickly touch upon my passion. So it's not so much customer data; it is more about data. Right? I have a PhD in data, worked in a company which was around data, and then started company. Like in general, like data, like ML now, because like you need ML to process large amounts of data and make sense out of it. And so on. So that's kind of where my passion is. And then like what if you look at like broadly, like in any enterprise, like the customer data is the most important data, right? That's why there are log data, which is also useful in some sense, and there is like IoT data, which if you're like an IoT company, but like for most companies, customer data is the most useful data, right? So that's kind of like if you start a company, probably, and you're interested in data, customer data makes a lot of sense. Now, so yeah, it's like in fact, like in my first company, first customer data company, I started in 2014 with two other co-founders, and the high level idea was to use machine learning to do like a lot of marketing. Like the main use case of customer data is marketing. Now there are use cases beyond that, but like the number one use case is marketing, and marketing is still very, very manual, right? You have to kind of because there's a creative aspect of marketing, which is like come up with like ads and like messaging and so on. Like, that is very creative aspect, but then there are also like not so creative aspects of marketing, right? If you have to figure out, like, if you're a consumer company and you're trying to figure out what is the right promotion I want to send to this person, right? Like based on what he has done, or like what he or she has done, or what is the right next message to send to let's say to a given prospect if you're a B2B company, right? All these things, like marketeers are coming up with they're doing it manually, but there is this has to be personalized, right? The messaging and the promotion or something that will work for one may or may not work for somebody else, right? So those are the things you want to automate with machine learning, and that was my first company all about, right? We kind of built a product around that. I think we built an amazing team and built a very good product, but the biggest problem we as a team ran into was most teams we sold to did not have very good data, right? I mean, you cannot do machine learning unless you have very good data about your customers. And
Right.
so on. So that's kind of was the learning in that company. We sold it to another company called 8x8. 8x8 is a public company. So, okay, so I thought, okay, now we are in a bigger organization. We have like a lot of data, and then we can now go and solve the same kind of things, right? Figure out what is the right messaging for a given prospect, what products we should sell next. Can we score the leads? Are they going to convert or not? Are they likely to churn or not? There are all these interesting use cases you wanted to build. But then all that required first getting the data together and so on. And then even at 8x8, I kind of struggle with that, right? Getting all this customer data into one single place and like stitching identities and so on. Like you need to first get the data, clean the data before you can do ML, and spent a lot of time just doing that. So thought like, okay, like if this is a problem for 8x8, I'm sure there's a problem for like ton of other companies as well. And that's what we are trying to do with RudderStack, right? I mean, like started the company to solve that exact problem, right? Help companies collect customer data. That's what we are doing right now. But the vision is to not just enable them to collect, but also like make sense with that data and like build like a platform and do ML and all the other cool things we wanted to do. But the first thing is like bringing all the data together. So that's kind of been like my journey, and like we are excited to be where we are, but like we have a long way to go.
I love it. I said the last decade, right? We spent all this time with data warehouses, data lakes, data this, data that. And I was like, oh my God, who cares, right? Like we collect the data, but we like didn't really do anything with the data, right? We didn't take the time to learn from the data and get the insights like you're speaking of, to be able to better leverage the data. So we spend a lot of time in healthcare, and it was like, oh my gosh, we've got to collect all this patient data and all this product data and data. And then I was like, like, who cares? Like, what are we doing with it? How are we improving healthcare with it? How are we making it more individualized? How are we paying attention to that patient's data so that we better treat them or better present, offerings to them that might make sense? Maybe preventative offerings. And everybody just kind of froze and was like, well, that's not what data is about. Data is about collecting data. And I'm like, well, to collect data for no purpose other than to collect data is ridiculous, right? Like that I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what do we do with the data? And so you're like on that part of the equation, right? You're like doing cool stuff. I'm just looking at some of the companies that you guys have at RudderStack, which is awesome, right? And one that comes up is Allbirds. And I'm a recent Allbirds fan, right? And I'm like getting presented with like, hey, look at this shoe, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need that shoe, right? So whatever you're doing with Allbirds is working because I keep buying Allbirds. So
amazing. I'll let the team know. They'll be very excited. And yes, I mean, we are working very closely with them in some of these things. I'm pretty sure like those promotions that you're getting is like a lot of it is powered by RudderStack, right? The data is flowing through RudderStack. And so then it's not that I don't want to take all the credit. I mean, they have an amazing team.
Sure.
They have built these solutions on top of like the data that is being collected through RudderStack and so on. So like, yeah, I mean, very, very glad to know.
Well, and I love that you highlighted marketing, right? Because I always point to the fact like TV just seems, take like Netflix and Hulu and stuff out of the picture, but just regular TV. Like you're sitting there watching a show, and then, the marketers had no idea who was watching. So you'd be a male sitting there, with your family, and up would come a feminine hygiene product ad. And you're like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable. Like, why is this being presented to me? Like, I don't need that, obviously. What a waste of my 30 seconds, right? And so people get mad about like ads and marketing around internet-based products. Like, well, Facebook just knows exactly what I want. And that's creepy. Wouldn't you rather get ads and marketing for things that you're interested in and you want versus feminine hygiene products, which sorry, ladies, but I literally have no interest in feminine hygiene products. Right? I mean, I want more targeted marketing. I do anyway. I mean, I would rather have ads. If I got to have ads, I'd rather have ads that are meaningful to me and might present a product that I didn't know about, or something that's new that I want to know about, but didn't know that I wanted to know about, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think like the interesting thing here is that like, I think both are possible, right? Like, I mean, I understand the concerns people have with like Facebook and Google's and like one or two vendors having all the data about you. But like that is really not required to show personalized marketing to you, right? If you think about it, right? I mean, like if you look at the internet, right? I mean, you went to like a website, allbirds.com, and then like you are getting targeted ads from Allbirds around, okay, now like you checked out these set of shoes, and then like these are the third, fourth relevant shoes that you should be getting, and you're seeing that ad on CNN.com, right? So the parties here involved is like Allbirds is involved and CNN is involved, and like CNN has to show the ad and Allbirds has to collect the data, right? Why do we need like these middlemen like Facebooks and Googles of the world? Like it's just how the system has been architected, and there's no reason to do that, right? In fact, so I do the concerns people have with like these gatekeepers of data, but then that is not required, and I think that's where we kind of can play in, right? I mean, if we ever become relevant and big over time, hopefully we will, then like you would not need like these gatekeepers like Facebooks and Googles of the world to collect everything, right? I mean, it's like a three-party, like Allbirds already knows what are the products you are browsing and what are the things, and you want Allbirds to know, right? That's how you get all the promotions. But then like for them to show the ad on CNN or some other thing, you should not have to send everything to Facebook. And I think that is the direction the world is going to, and that's where that's the other reason I'm kind of excited about, like, of course I'm biased, but like the broader space of customer data, right? You don't have to send everything to Facebook. Like you can build this infrastructure with a tool like RudderStack and so on, so that you can like do targeted marketing, but while still being like privacy aware and so on. So.
I love it. So we're when we talk about all this customer data, talk a little bit about customer data management, like maybe like high level, what does that really mean? And then there's always fights over data, right? Everybody's like, oh, data's power. So if I own the data, then I am all powerful, right? And so the business marketing's like, no, we own the data. And then IT's like, no, we own the data. And everyone's battling over this data. Maybe talk a little bit about what is customer data management and really where should that sit and why?
Yeah, so like, IT and marketing is always an interesting trade-off. Like both have, like, marketing is the end user of the data, but like let's kind of start with a concrete example, right? I mean, let's go with the same example that we talked about, right? I mean, you're shopping on Allbirds, and like you go to the website and you check out a bunch of products, and Allbirds wants to do promotions and marketing based on your activity on the website, right? The things that you checked out, the products you checked out, and so on, right? So the first step to build that stack is to like first collect that data, right? I mean, not just transactions data, like things you bought, but also like your browsing data. Like these are the products I checked out, and I added something to the cart and dropped off, right? So all this data is useful to send you promotions, right? So that's the first part, right? Getting the data about their own customers, right? Now bringing the data into, and even then there are two solutions. Like you can either rely on a third party like Google and Facebook and send everything to them and then rely on that, or like more and more these companies are realizing like that's not a best approach, right? I want to, like, I should be the owner of that data. This is my customers, and I should bring it everything into like a data warehouse or a data lake or whatever I own, right? So that's where like a tool like RudderStack comes in. We'll help you collect all the data. Now you have the data. Then comes the next step of figuring out like what promotions should I be offering whom, right? And that is where the decision engine comes in, right? I mean, you have to figure out like, okay, maybe they want to give promotions to high, like people who are actually likely to convert, right? People who are likely to buy, and people who have long-term lifetime value, right? So there are things like you compute what is the lifetime value of a customer, and are they likely to buy this product? Which products are you likely to buy? You may be checking out like 20 different products. Are you like what is your propensity to buy a certain set of products? So that's where all the ML stuff comes in, right? Where you're computing the lifetime value and the propensity and so on, right? So you do all that. And this is where really, again, it becomes important to own the data. Like if you have data, you can do a lot more better than like relying on Facebook and Google to figure out what products to promote, right? So, and then that is the next step. And then the final step is to like actually execute the campaign, right? I mean, you want to like,
right,
you are the person and this is the product I want to promote. And then like you want to execute that campaign on a cross-channel way, right? I mean, you want to send them an email and a push notification and maybe show them an ad on Facebook or ad on some other channel, right? So that's the first part of like collecting the data, building the ML models, and then activating the data out, right? To different things. Right? So this is the end-to-end stack, and that's what that's what like we as a company enable, right? Now, if you think about which persona in the company, right? Who should be building this stack? Is it the marketing team? Is it the data team? Is it the engineering team? Is it somebody else, right? So now, traditionally, it has been marketing because like they have been running these promotions. Now, the problem with, and again, like not to belittle marketing in any way, but like the challenge with marketing is like they cannot own infrastructure, they cannot build these ML models, right? So traditionally, they would have bought SaaS solutions, right? Okay, I'll buy like either I use like a platform like Facebook, Google, or buy some other SaaS solution who will collect all the data and then who will give me the tools to like run these campaigns. Now there are a couple of problems with that approach, right? Firstly, you're losing control over the data. You're now sending everything to a third-party vendor. You don't have control over, and then that also and kind of corollary to that is like you don't have a lot of flexibility, right? You get what you get out of those SaaS solutions,
Right.
right? If you want to plug in your own ML models, right? So more and more these companies are realizing that no, like it's not enough to just rely on a SaaS solution, and you have to build this infrastructure yourself, right? And that's where like the engineering teams come in, right? I mean, I don't call it IT. Like traditionally, IT has been associated with like they are a cost center, but that's where like the data teams, the engineering teams come in, and whether you call it like the chief data officer and so on, they are putting together this stack, right? And say, I mean, if you look at like the Amazons of the world and the Apples of the world, they have built this out, like the Netflixes of the world. Like they have a complete huge team which builds it out, and then
Right.
more and more mainstream companies are also building it out. So it is very much like an engineering problem, right? You need data engineers and data scientists to put together this stack, right? And that's where I think like the future is where like, and you need close partnership with marketing, right? Marketing will be actually using the data, but the infrastructure and the setup has to be provided by the data teams.
To me, marketing is the customer, right? And
Exactly.
and all these folks, right? And companies often tell me they get kind of overwhelmed. They're like, "Oh man, you know how much a data scientist costs? You know how much this costs? Like, I can't hire all, especially mid to smaller companies. They're like, I can't hire that." And I'm like, no one told you had to hire it, right? You need to partner with it, right? You need to find a company that has all that and brings that to you.
Yeah.
Stop trying to hire all these people, right? Like, unless you're a really large company, you're right. These people are expensive, right? Because they have PhDs in data, right? Like, and they've invested half their lives trying to figure this out, and yeah, they're going to cost you, more than 50K a year. So, um,
And so,
it's interesting to me.
and one thing I would add here is like the problem is not just like hiring a data scientist, right? It is also like enabling the data scientist, right? You hire a data scientist, but like I mean, I was kind of trying to do the same thing at 8x8. I was a data scientist. We have a team of data scientists, right? But 90% of the time, we are just figuring out how to collect data and how to clean that data and like doing like basic stuff before you can do data science, right? So there is when you are talking about this stack, there is part of that which is like the maybe the data science aspect and the modeling aspect where you have to partner closely with marketing to figure out like what models make sense, what not, right? There is that part, and there is the other 90% boring stuff of building this infrastructure and collecting this data and building all the integrations and so on, right? So that's how companies need to figure out like something is core to my business, and like that's where I need to own, and there is something like that is not core to my business. I can use like a tool like RudderStack or whatever. I mean, there are other players as well, like to like enable that plumbing and like and so on, which is not like my strategic advantage. And that's how
Right.
companies should be thinking about it. Right? So,
By the way, data scientist is like got to be one of the coolest new titles that has emerged in the last like 10 years. Like everybody's like, "Oh, I want to be a data scientist." I'm like, "Yeah."
yeah.
Like we're pouring data between test tubes. It's like
That's funny.
it's kind of cool, right? Like everybody's like, "Oh, data science," and then they approach it and they go, "Oh my god, that's a really hard degree to get," right? That's like a lot of work, and then a lot of people either don't undertake it or change in the way. Oh, I'll just be a developer. And there's nothing wrong with being a developer, right? That's very cool too. So one of the kind of taglines that you guys talk about is you guys are a customer data platform for developers. Talk to me a little bit about what that means, and like I'm all about like let's do something with the data. And for once, I think like I'm going to put you on the spot because I think you guys are doing something with the data, which to me is really kind of cool because so many people collect it, and I'm like, who cares? Like you
Yeah.
guys are like enabling the data back to the developers.
Yeah. So the reason we call ourselves CDP for developers has more to do with like the origin of the term CDP, right? So like this space started in the 2013-14 timeframe,
Right.
and there are a couple of vendors who built what I described earlier. Right? They built a SaaS solution, which like completely hosted by them, and they're trying to sell to the marketing people in the team, right? So this is like a difficult infrastructure to set up, manage. You shouldn't be doing it, and then like go and use this turnkey solution that as a marketeer you can come in and use, right? So and they coined the term CDP. In fact, like if you go to CDP Institute, like there's an institute which talks about that and defines that they're very much completely marketing focused, right? Now, like I kind of don't agree with that, because I think like when you talk about platforms, right? I mean, like platform has like a well-defined uh, like like definition. Right? You don't become like a platform. Being a SaaS solution is not a platform, right? You have to do certain things to be a platform, right? But anyway, like there is a category of vendors who call themselves CDP, selling to marketing, but they're primarily like SaaS solutions, right? For this, right? We, on the other hand, are like we are trying to be more like a platform, right? Like where you can like we can enable the data
Right.
collection, we can enable applications to be built on top of that, and it's not that we have built it completely, but like that's how we aspire to be, right? Now, and we are very much focused on the data persona, like the engineering teams. Like as I said, our whole hypothesis is that it is the data teams who should be building this infrastructure. Like these companies should not be buying like a hosted SaaS solution where you lose control of the data and so on, right? So like
I like that.
I believe like longer term we want to be that platform layer and we are to sell to the developers. But because like the CDP term is usually associated with the marketing persona, we thought okay, like we'll tag on CDP for developers. I'd rather choose some other term, but like category creation is hard, right? I mean, if you want to coin a new term and how do you like talk about it and so on. So like that's kind of the reason for like CDP for developers actually does not make sense. Like CDP, any platform is by definition for developers, right? Like so.
Theoretically, yeah, yeah. I mean, usually what people talk to me about is they talk to me about like the accessibility or the connectors, right? And I'm like, okay, okay. I really, right. I tell all my guests, I cyber stalk you while we're in episode. I crawl your website kind of on the other side because it really tells me a lot about the company. And like the first thing, and I always seem to go to like the hiring page, right? I'm like, what are they telling prospective people to like want to come work at RudderStack, right? So if you're listening to this episode and you're like, ooh, this sounds really cool, and I want in, right? Like I want to come play with data and become a data scientist. Um, yeah, the first thing you guys talk about is this customer centricity, right? Um, so many times I think data is so vast, right? Because there's so, like you highlighted, there's IoT data, there's log data, there's application data, there's all this data. And people get overwhelmed. I mean, people see that and they're like, I have to do something with all of it. And they just like, and then it becomes boiling the ocean and they wind up doing nothing with any of it, right? Which is where I think we've been the beginning of this decade, right? I think everybody wants to do something with, and that manifests itself in a bunch of different ways. People come and talk to me about business intelligence or analytics and reporting. And I'm like, what you're really talking about is data. And they're like, no, I'm talking about reporting. And I'm like, no, reporting is an end product of data, right? Come all the way back down here to data. And the resistance to do that is, Michael, that's so large. It's such a mess. It's not standardized. Like we've collected it, but we haven't related it. And they just get so overwhelmed by it, but they want the end result without doing the work.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
that usually doesn't go well when you try to shortcut stuff. So then you get, just the tip of the iceberg, just the tiny little bit of information. You get so excited about it. And I'm like, you're missing the point. You're missing the whole opportunity around data. So I get excited when I see a company that's really focused around the customer aspect, right? I mean, it's so easy to geek out about data and it's so easy to geek out about, how we've related the data and all the ML, technologies and what all that can do. But you guys kind of like aren't even talking. I mean, you talk about it, but you're more talking and focused around, how do we leverage this for the customer? And that's, to me, that's different than I've seen.
Yeah, and in fact, that also impacts our roadmap in a big way, right? I mean, like like data space is huge, right? I mean, like when I was doing my PhD, like a lot of my research came from these this center called Center for Rocket Simulation, and they used to run rocket simulations and generate petabytes of data, and that was like a huge set of technologies we used to. This is pre Hadoop days, right? So there was like NCSA clusters and so on. The set of technologies, right? So I mean, there's a huge history, right? And the technologies after technologies have been developed, right, to like process data. I think that the way we think about this is like there are horizontal technologies, right? I mean, like let's take Spark, right? You can use Spark for log data, for you can do for IoT data, like there, or something else, like for customer data and pretty much everything. There are these horizontal technologies which can work for anything. But then when you take like a horizontal technology like that and then try to solve customer data problems, like let's say you want to solve very specific things for customer data, right? So like that's where you have to get a do a lot of heavy lifting, right? I mean, like there are specific problems for customer data, right? Which is how do you stitch identities? How do you and that's one problem. How do you create user sessions, and how do you do customer journeys, and then how do you create this customer feature store, right? They're when you just try to solve customer problems, there are like 5 or 6 ML models that everyone cares about, right? So you can either build it through horizontal technologies, or you can use something which is solve it for customer data, right? And then do it in an open way, right? It's not like a SaaS solution that you completely black box, right? So that's the approach we are taking, right? I mean, you can always build a similar stack with horizontal technology, but we are kind of trying to solve it for the narrow domain of customer data. So like RudderStack will not be applicable for IoT data, but let's solve it for customer data, which makes it more, at least that is huge and a big enough a market for us. So both kind of companies will do well, I'm sure. But that's kind of our.
I love it. When we talked a few episodes ago around master data management, right? Like finding and
Yeah.
defining like what is that the most important data, what is the most relatable data, and really getting down to that, and then let's really focus on that. Let's hyper focus on that because that
Yeah.
drives the majority. And I think focus. I'm imagining Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi going, focus, grasshopper. Let's not focus on all data because that's crazy. Let's get down to what is that customer data that you just outlined a few things like session data and stuff, right? Let's pay attention to what's really important. And then you used another term that I loved, like the customer journey, right? Like let's understand what we do with the data and how it leads us, and we follow the customer and then make their experience meaningful, right? Make their
Yeah.
interaction with us something that they go, wow, how did they know that about me? That's really cool. Yeah, I am interested in that. And oh, look at that. And from that I get to the next interesting thing, and pretty soon I have 4 pairs of Allbirds sitting at home. And by the way, we're using Allbirds as an example. If you haven't seen or worn or checked out Allbirds, go check out Allbirds. Allbirds are amazing shoes. Not that I'm pushing Allbirds, nor is this sponsored by Allbirds, nor does this really have
No,
anything
they
to
would be
do with
very happy to hear this. I
yeah.
mean, I'll actually post it right after this. Like we have a Slack channel with all the customers, right? So I'm actually very excited about, because we partner very very closely with them, right? I mean, like we have I mean, some of the things. I mean, they have been helping us figuring out our own roadmap. Right? These are the things I should be building. So
That's
I'm very
awesome.
glad to know that this is hearing from their customers is super exciting. So yeah, I mean, they would be very excited to know this.
It's so cool. Like, and your customers, like you said, you're kind of partnering with them. Like, what if you had to look at the future of customer data management, and kind of these platforms? Where do you see that going as people start to really leverage it and pay attention to it and want to do something with their customer data? Where do you see like RudderStack and other companies like that kind of helping companies?
Yeah, it's kind of I think if you talk about the broader trends in this, right? I mean, like very few companies are actually today leveraging customer data, in spite of people talking about
Wow.
it for a very very long time, right? So so I think yeah, I mean yeah, I mean, Allbirds is still pretty advanced. I mean, there are other vendors really really large enterprises we are working with, and I cannot name them because we are still not customers. We are in POC stage and so on. But like these are like household brands, but then they're just getting started with like collecting customer data. They're like 100-year-old brand, but now they're thinking, I mean, they bought point solutions and so on, but like that is not working, and they're thinking about holistically and so on. So I think like this still, like, in spite of there being so much of interest, like this still very much in the infancy, right? And and the kind of I'm just talking about like data collection and basic stuff with data, like analytics, basic ML, right? But then like you can go like the vision was always doing like like uh, there are two aspects to this. One is like the data science aspects of it, like the kind of ML stuff you can do, right? I mean, you could literally be very, very targeted with like with promotions and things you can do. Like there's one dimension of that. The other dimension of this is around like data privacy and data ownership, right? So how do you really like right now a lot of this advanced stuff is being controlled by the like the Facebooks of the world and Googles of the world, right? And they have the infrastructure and so on. And then because of like privacy focus and so on, that will like the same Allbirds and the companies like that will be building similar infrastructure. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what Facebook has and the kind of targeting Facebook has, they can like these companies should be building. So like that requires a lot of technical innovation and so on. So I think these are the two dimensions, right?
I always say data just can. I talk a lot about gamification, and people kind of look at me and they go like video games, and I'm like, well, sort of, right? Because in video games, you're incented to get points or coins or tokens or badges or whatever, right? Gamification has that same. If we look at data, like it's almost like there's rewards, right, for people that follow data, or if data leads them somewhere and they do things, you whether you're building up Target points, at Target. My wife was talking to me yesterday and she's like, I shop at Target a lot and look, I get all these Target points. And I'm like, that's because you spend way too much at Target, right? And they're gamifying you to believe that the more you spend, you
Yeah.
get this free money, which isn't really free because it's built into their pricing of all the crap
Yeah.
that keeps coming from Target. Like you're being gamed by the system. The marketers have gamed you to believe that shopping at Target is, has, there's just so much around gamification that we can do from a data perspective once we
Yeah.
understand our customers, right? Like, and be like, oh, this person's going to go on this journey. And it's so cool. I mean, you in a geeky kind of way, right? I mean, those of us that are data geeks, we kind of geek out over it.
Yeah. 100%. In fact, like that's to some extent that is also scary. I mean, like I know we are in this space where we are talking about like okay, like we can enable truly one-to-one personalization and so on. But in one aspect, like I mean, if you take a very utilitarian view of this, right? I mean, like you think about it, like sending all these promotions and so on. I'm kind of like in some way compelling you to spend more, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is this really helping you? Maybe not. Like so, but anyway, like that's like too much into philosophy. I think like
Well, and there's a lot, right, that's emerged recently about the ethics, right? The ethics around AI, right? Of which I say machine learning is a big part of what people perceive as AI. It's really things like machine learning on the back end and natural language processing and other technologies that comprise a portfolio that I'd like to say is AI, because
yeah.
AI doesn't really exist. But um, there's an ethics issue. Like, okay, I've got all this data. I now know Michael as an Allbirds customer. There's a responsibility around what to do with that information, right? That I think
Yeah.
customer or B2B customers of yours, right? Companies that do it really well and they value that and they go, look, we don't want to send Michael down a path to some crappy stuff he doesn't need because then he's going to unsubscribe and opt out and now we've lost him.
Mhm.
They perceive it at least at, hey, let's make sure that we're providing value, right? I always
Yeah.
tell people like every email you send, every contact you have, you want to have something of value, right? Whether that's like a product that Michael wants to see, and I get some value out of that because I'm like, oh, I didn't know that it came in red. Okay, that was valuable to me because now I know it comes in red. Or or something about that has to have value, right? And there has to be an ethical responsibility to take some responsibility over this knowledge and data by these
Yeah,
companies.
100%, right? I mean, uh, in fact, like, and it is very much aligned with their long-term objective of like maximizing revenue, shareholder value, whatever, right? I mean, you don't want to like send random promotions to somebody anyway, because like they will check out, they will not, like, you lose them as a customer, right? So I think like the dilemma is not there really. I mean, it's kind of aligned. This is what you should be doing anyway, right? So I think that's why things are easy. Things where things become tricky is like, yeah, how are you training the ML models? Like, I mean, like for some vendors like Allbirds and so on, it is well aligned. If you are like a financial company and you're approving loans and you build an ML model for that, and that was trained on something, right? And then like maybe that model was trained on biased data, and then like you are denying applications to certain people where they should not be denying, right? So those are the gray areas, and how do you even like make sure that the ML models? I mean, humans were always biased, right? So it's not that ML is making things worse, but like but that doesn't is not an excuse, right? So you still have to figure out how to. So those are the hard problems. I'm not an expert by any means,
Yeah.
but I'm sure like there are brain power focused
Well,
on this.
and I think customer data is one thing. You guys have a customer that I just have to talk about, right? We have to talk about Hinge because I mean, that's like swipe right, swipe left, but like pretty soon, Michael only swipes right on blonde women that are between this age that like long walks on a beach and like animals and stuff. Like you could really get personal having like a company like that as that's not like Michael likes the color red in shoes. Let's present Michael red shoes. That's like now you're dealing in the product of people, right? And relationships.
Yeah.
Has that been harder or different? I mean, when you guys think about, is data just data, or is somehow you're like, ooh, this is different?
So one thing though is like we have like different uh, deployment models, if you will, of our infrastructure, right?
Okay.
One is like a SaaS solution where like although we don't store any data, like the data still flows through, the bits flow through us. And then one is like where it is completely deployed in a customer environment. The bits don't even touch us, right? And so on, right? So at least like in the Hinge case, like we are in that latter model, right? So we don't know any, nothing. None. We are just like we don't see any of that data, right? So that's kind of like at least like takes away our liability with that data.
Sure.
But then how what Hinge is doing with that, I'm sure like they have very good practices and so on around that data control. But it's a fair point. I mean, like you're talking about very very private data and people's interests. So like companies which are collecting this data, like uh, they they probably have to put together like processes to make sure that is like well protected and like it's not uh, uh,
I mean, I just
like
love your customer list, right? As I just keep poking around, I mean, right, like there's large brands that we all know, like Crate and Barrel, right? And you're like, oh, that's really cool. And you just think about all the products that Crate and Barrel has, and then all the data, and all the diversity of that data that comes in, and you know, uh, and then you have literally my favorite hotel in the entire world. If you haven't stayed at the Wynn properties in Las Vegas, oh my,
have
oh
not.
my God, that is you'll stay there, and then the Bellagio is like Motel 6.
Oh, really?
The Wynn and
Yeah.
Steve Wynn have done an amazing job. Um, and partially because they anticipate your needs, right? Like they know enough about you through data, by the way, not like some dude creepily following you around the hotel, but they like are almost predictive in your needs. It's kind of a weird experience at the Win, in a very good way. And it just makes you go, man, this property is amazing. Uh, it's really cool as I look at just the diversity of data. So you guys have been able to apply RudderStack to help companies cross industry. Like, I mean, we've seen everything from people to dishes and everything in between.
Yeah, and that is what keeps me excited. And like, I mean, startups are hard, but but like the ubiquity of this problem, right? And like pretty much any consumer brand or even like B2B brands, like
Mm-hmm.
they like if you have any relationship with customers, you hopefully need RudderStack or a RudderStack like solution to like do like all that stuff that you're talking about, like personalized marketing and also like the use cases are beyond marketing. It's not just marketing is one of the big drivers, but then there are like support use cases and product understanding. How do you improve the product experience itself, right? How do you improve the support experience? Like all these different functions also need that data. Like Crate and Barrel, I know like we are like the data being collected through RudderStack is like also used in their call centers. Like so, if you call into their call center, like they can look at your profile and figure out like what kind of service you want to offer them, right, and so on. And again, it is that same data. So like yeah, the use case is well beyond
Um,
marketing.
and you guys are obviously in a bit of a growth mode, right? At least it seems like it. Because as I look out, um, and you go to the careers and such, there's not like just a position. I mean, you guys are hiring for probably no less than 30-35 positions, both technical positions, sales positions, marketing, customer success. It's like just such a cool time right now. If there's younger listeners and they're like, "Oh, I'm getting a computer science degree," like I really challenge you to pause and think about data as a career path because
Yeah,
data. I forget what the statistic is, but data just keeps doubling, right? The amount of data that everyone's collecting. And guess what? They're looking for people and companies and tools like RudderStack to help them do something with the data. And it's not like, oh, I'm a programmer and okay, there's programmers has existed for, 20, 30, 40 years, going back to key card punches and such. But like data is still, I would say data is like a relatively still new and emerging career field.
yeah.
Maybe if you could just talk, like, what do you guys look for in what you hire, for folks to join? Because you guys are in startup mode, but you have great customers. You're on this growth pattern. You're getting all this investment. Like, to me, it's an exciting place. It just sounds exciting to me. What do you guys look for?
Yeah, I mean, like we are hiring for to your point, like across different profiles, right? Like, I mean, if you talk about technical roles, they're primarily in two buckets, right? Either it's like in the product and engineering org, and so on, or it is in the customer-facing org, right, where you are either like helping customers implement RudderStack or implement solutions on top of RudderStack, right? So there are kind of these two buckets. Like when it comes to the engineering org, I mean, I in fact have a slightly different opinion about computer science curriculum in general. And I know data and machine learning is important, but like so is fundamental computer science, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I think like when you're like maybe just going into college, I'd rather encourage people to like study computer science, right? I mean, like you need to have strong fundamentals, right? And like algorithms and like and stuff. And then you can always do like specialization and take 3 or 4 courses in like ML or data science and so on. I mean, if you want to
Mhm.
like go to Google and build their next gen like deep neural networks and like and GPT and whatever is the next version, then you need like a lot of advanced uh, thing on ML. But like for most purpose, like I mean, you'd rather focus on fundamental CS. So like yeah, that's what I think we check for. Like
That's
are your
great.
fundamentals strong and like if you're a good programmer and so on.
I mean,
When it comes to
as people who
the
just start, right, and are considering it, I mean, you're right. I always tell my founders and such, like, you guys are like, people look at you guys and they're like, how do I do that? Right. I mean, you've started 3 companies, you're, a successful founder. I mean, people are like, how do I follow his path? Like, how do I do what he's just done? That sounds so cool.
yeah, yeah, I mean that's another thing, right? I mean like being a founder is very different. Like I mean like I don't know, like the kind of Dane problems. Like, of course, like there is the vision and what we are trying to build, and that's why, like, my hopefully all the experiences I had helps, like in my PhD and later companies and so on. But day in day out, you are like just like fighting fires and so on. Like, so those are things you need skills which are well beyond just like what you are taught in college or pretty much anywhere. Right? I mean, I guess like you have to be a founder to like really figure that out and so on. And then different stages of the company have different sets of challenges. Right? Early stage, you are mostly figuring out the product, and then once you have some product market fit, you are kind of figuring out hiring and so on. And then beyond that, now you're figuring out like strategy and so on. So I think like being a founder has very different skill sets, and that's why I guess like people, all different kind of background people come and succeed in like being founders, like technical, non-technical, and so on. Like,
That's very cool.
but yeah.
I am. You get to be a little bit of everything, right? We had a founder on the other day, and he said, at this phase, right? I think they were probably still earlier than you. He's like, being a founder is all about securing funding. He's like,
Yeah.
if we don't have funding, it doesn't really matter what I found because it's not going to go anywhere. It's like, so being a funder is like, I'm the chief fundraiser, being a founder, and also a tech startup.
If there is one skill that you need as a founder, it is sales. Like, you're selling to your initial customers early on, then you're selling to prospective employees to join you, or you're selling to your investors to like give you money and so on. Like, you're pretty much like always selling, right? And like, even if they're like, if you're handling conflicts, you're also selling it, selling the vision, selling this. So I grew up in India. Like, we are culturally very different. I mean, my daughter is growing up in the US, and I see the difference, right? I think like part of the reason the US has been so successful in like in this general startup culture, right? I mean, if you look at anywhere across the world and US, and the companies that are being founded and so on, like I think this culture of telling your story and like some sales skill, I think that is taught so early in like, it's not formally taught. It is just like you pick up that skill and so on. Like, being creative is also part of that, right? So compared to like the education that I got in India, it was very much focused on like, okay, you need to be an engineer, so you need to be very good at maths. Like, there are pros and cons of everything, but like at least the system here, I see my daughter, like she's in like fifth grade, and I see the education she's getting, and I think like this is perfect for being a founder. So.
That's awesome. That's such a cool observation, right? And great advice, to folks that are considering a career or trying to find a path. I get so many comments around, oh, this guest talked about this, and like, that's really cool. And how do I do that as a career? And I'm always like, talk to them, like reach out and find them on LinkedIn and send them a message. And, most of my founders and most of my podcast guests are busy people, but they're also very approachable, and they're always, I haven't met anyone who said, I don't want anyone to contact me and I never want to talk to any of your audience, right? They're always very like, hey, if I can help or offer some advice or, just reach out, right? I think the younger people just starting, sometimes they see like founder and it's like, this isn't a company of like 10 million people, right? This is, they're still very approachable. It's
in fact, like, I think this culture of paid forward like is very much there in entrepreneurs. I mean, like there are people who have helped me for absolutely no reason. I mean, I remember like when I was like starting my second company, and I was sitting in a room and reached out to a CEO of a public company. I mean, I didn't know him. I just like mailed him on LinkedIn, and he responded back. He was the founder CEO of like a $10 billion company, and he said, okay, I'll take a 30-minute call with you and so on. So I think like it's kind of like and then it's not just one outlier. I mean, I've had this help consistently, so it'd be bad on my part to not like pay it forward.
I love it. Yeah.
And by no means I'm like successful, but like whatever help I can provide, I'm absolutely open to.
I love it. Well, you guys seem well on your way at RudderStack to really great success. I mean, you're focused on, to me, right, other than like healthcare patient data and trying to save lives and such, customer data, which could also be patient data, right, for healthcare systems. To me, that just seems, to your point, to be some of the most important data that we collect, and to do something meaningful with it, and take customers on a meaningful journey and add value and in turn help customers from a B2B perspective or B2C perspective is very cool. Um, any how would you summarize RudderStack, I guess, at the end? Like if somebody said, what's the elevator pitch for RudderStack? Like what is it and like where does it fit? Maybe we can close with that because we've covered a lot, but I want to like highlight, we've talked a lot about the industry and data. I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about RudderStack specifically.
Yeah, I mean, like it's interesting. I mean, I haven't. I had an elevator pitch, but it has been so long. I don't even remember. Like, I mean, apparently in New York, you're not allowed to talk to people in the elevators. Right? There is a law against that. So, so the elevator pitch is not of no use. But ignoring that, right? I think. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, like one way is like okay, like I can talk about what we do, right? Which is like we enable our customers like Allbirds and so on to make use of their customer data, and the use cases are like a lot, right? From analytics to machine learning to marketing and so on. So we kind of enable that, right? So that's kind of
Right.
one line summary. But like when I think about like the mission of the company, right? It's not just that, right? I think the the broader thing was like I had that role at 8x8 and in previous roles where I came in with the I was an engineer and then I with a data science kind of background, and then I was almost like trying to prove my worth, right? I mean, like, am I like data engineers historically have been okay? You are running some pipelines, you are not having business impact, like you're just like some sitting somewhere in a room and so on. But then to level up, like you have to like solve business problems with the data you are collecting, right? So that is what is important for like truly make them like to give data teams like a seat on the table of like and so on, right? So that's what I like hopefully we will enable, right? Like help data teams solve important business problems and not just like somebody who is managing pipelines for other teams.
I love it. Right. Through this episode, I mean, I've heard a focus on the customer profiles, customer journeys, customer. We're having a tech talk around data management, essentially. And you've mentioned customer so many times. I mean, it's obvious that it's kind of at the forefront of what you guys do. It's the value proposition to your clients. Um, Thank you for taking the time. This to me has been really cool. We've given great examples of what RudderStack does, with the importance of, I think, customer data management as a component of master data management. We've talked about data stacks. And we've talked about really cool examples of why Michael keeps buying Allbirds. So if you guys could, stop being so good, and I can stop buying Allbirds, that'd be amazing. And it's just been really cool. You've made it very consumable, a complex. You think somebody with a PhD in data, you'd be like, "Uh-oh, we're going to be all technical." But I really appreciate the way that you talk about the subject and what RudderStack is doing to enable customer data management and actually doing something with the data, which I think is a bit of a differentiator.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed talking to you and like getting your insights about data and so on. So yeah, really enjoyed that.
Awesome.